Hi, we're live. So, hi, this is Shock Exchange, and this is Trump and the GE, where we discuss the president's policies and how they affect the economy and the community. Torian Mitchell could be joining us shortly, but tonight we'll discuss. Tonight's topic is Trump and the GE, Endo moves in silence. And from time to time, we discuss stocks that are pretty interesting, that we think have pretty interesting value propositions. In the past, we've discussed Teva. We've discussed Michael's companies, and we've discussed Endo International. Endo is a generic pharmaceutical company that has faced its share of faced some major headwinds over the past few years. I think management's done an excellent job of stewarding the company, managing the company through these headwinds. They faced over $2 billion in mesh claims, vaginal mesh claims. They have $8 billion in debt, over $8 billion in debt, and they faced a diminution in their generics business in terms of pricing, as the FDA has approved drugs quicker. It's hurt the generics market and hurt generic pricing, which has obviously hurt Endo, Teva, and Viatris. The management's done a great job of managing these headwinds and also weaning the company off of pain-related drugs, off of Apana. They took Apana off the market, which was their opiate, back in 2017. They weaned the company away from pain-related drugs like Percocet, Lidoderm, Vicodin, and still paid vaginal mesh claims on times and have been able to service debt. So the company's trading at below around like $2.32, which I think is practically criminal. Again, it faces thousands and opiate lawsuits for their role in the opiate crisis, which they've admitted to. They admitted that they've had a role in the opiate crisis, and they, along with Teva and lots of other companies, want to pay their fair share and they want to help with treatment and prevention. How much they will ultimately pay is uncertain. I think that's affecting the stock price, and people who, like short sellers who I think are manipulating the stock and want to see the stock fall, have continued to put out uncertainty and fear around how much Endo will ultimately have to pay for these opiate claims. They could be in the billions, it could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. As a proxy, Mallinckrodt settled for $1.6 billion. Endo has, in my opinion, far less opiate exposure than Mallinckrodt had. And again, it took Apana off the market in 2017. In a lot of ways, it's been a good citizen and been best in class in terms of how opiate companies or these opiate manufacturers should have reacted to the opiate epidemic. And I think they've been exemplars, and they've been praised by the Attorney General of Oklahoma for their behavior and their reaction and their cooperation in reacting to the opiate crisis when it first materialized and when it was first brought to the attention of the public by lawmakers like Donald Trump and state AGs around the country. With the stock trades around $2.32 again, which I think is criminal. A lot of the bad news, whether it's a large opiate settlement, whether it's generic competition for their largest for Vasostrict, their largest product. I think a lot of that bad news is already priced into the stock. I'll give you a couple of important dates for Endo. On August 6th, the company issued an S3, which gave them the right to raise capital, whether it was debt, equity, and also gave them the right to buy back stock. Tori and I don't think the company is going to raise equity, even though they just they did raise debt. They issued debt to replace existing debt, so it wouldn't be a debt raise per se, just replacing existing debt in the marketplace, and which is pretty well subscribed. I think that the ultimate cost was like 6.2% interest rates, was pretty good in this market, particularly given Endo's credit metrics. Its debt is way above 5 times EBITDA, which tends to be the cutoff for junk status. So they issued an S3, which also gave them the right, again, to buy back stock, which we think they could be quietly doing at this point. On August 3rd, the state AG asked Judge Jerry Gargiulo, who is the judge in the the opiate cases in New York and out in Long Island to issue a default judgment against Endo for not delivering information and materials in a timely manner. And the plaintiffs are saying that if Endo had delivered certain documents in a timely manner, it may have changed their negotiating strategy or their their approach to the lawsuit. So it sort of mirrors a default judgment that Endo actually got in Tennessee. They received a default judgment from Judge Moody in Tennessee for where they faced about over $2 billion in exposure. They settled those claims for like $35 million, much less than what the headline number was. But it was a small county in Tennessee called Sullivan County, which is probably a windfall for that county. But the stock immediately reacted, went above $5.80, and then it stalled as short sellers dumped about 20 million shares onto the market that they did not own over the course of 2 days. So that hurt the rally. It also probably took a lot of enthusiasm away from the stock, where a lot of day traders were probably entering the stock, and it really fizzled out a rally, and it kept Endo from trading at what I think is fair value, or anything close to fair value, in my opinion. Hold on one second. Yeah, Tony. Oh, one second. I don't see you on here. Hold on. No, it's Endo moves in silence.
Oh shit. My bad, man. I literally been sitting here since I texted you.
Okay.
All right, let me find the link.
I just emailed to like 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. That's Torian about to enter the discussion. So but anyway, so on August on August 3rd, the New York State AG asked for a default judgment from Jerry Gargiulo, and it's getting a lot of play in the media. It's still up in the air, and we don't know what that amount could be if they actually had a default judgment, whether it's hundreds of millions of dollars or over billions of dollars. But the state AG is asking for way more than what Endo settled for in Tennessee. And that's all we know. So that's causing a lot of uncertainty for the stock. When you hear about default judgments and potential contempt of court, that those words don't sit well with with investors. The sort of Damocles is hanging over Endo's head, according to the judge. It could be his ruling could be anywhere from no impact on Endo, where he does nothing, or it could be a potential headshot, whatever that means. So that's caused a lot of uncertainty for the stock, and it's traded down again to levels where I think are pretty ridiculous. On August 20th, the Wall Street Journal put out a report that Endo was talking to Alvarez and Marsal, a restructuring firm, and looking at options to potentially restructure his debt. And that could have, when we talk about restructuring debt, that means they may have to give up equity. My interpretation, they may have to give up equity in lieu of debt. Uh-huh. Yeah. No. One second. One second. Hold on, I'm just trying to help Torian log in. 1 second. I'm just talking to the people on the broadcast. Okay, did you get the link? Did you get the recent link? I'm just trying to help Torian log in right quick. Okay. So there we go.
All right, perfect.
All right. So we got Mr. Mitchell. So yeah, so Tori, I was just basically sorry for the technical difficulties here, but yeah, I was just basically giving a background of the situation with Endo and a couple of dates to discuss the S3 on August 6th, the fact that the state AG asked for a default judgment on August 3rd, and now on August 20th, the Wall Street Journal put out a report that Endo could be is in discussions with Alvarez and myself for a potential restructuring of its debt. That really sent fissures for the stock. The stock again fell about 40% that day on 45 million shares traded. And when I hear the restructuring, I hear a potential, but for Endo to could be it's a wide range of scenarios, but one could be that Endo may have to um, give up a large part of his equity in lieu of debt. Excuse me, or swap debt for equity. And that would hurt. That would create dilution, and it would hurt existing shareholders. That's where we are as far as the a lot of goings on, and things have been moving pretty rapidly after state AG asked for a default judgment, and it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for Endo to talk to different people about potential restructuring, given what the potential outcome of this cloud over this default judgment, what it ultimately ends up. Right now, the judge has assigned a referee to look at the default judgment and look at has how tardy has Endo been in delivering the materials to the plaintiffs, and does it warrant a default judgment or a contempt of court. So that's where we are. Then the very next trading day, there were 34 million shares traded. So the large trading volume makes us think that there could be Endo buying shares on the other side, particularly given the S3 in early August. So that's basically where we are. So let's give Mr. Mitchell a chance to discuss the current share price and the goings on pursuant to the default judgment, and what do you notice as far as the large trading volume and implications for that? So
Yeah, it was first generally, I think we've said it several times, especially since seeing the S3. Obviously, we have to wait. I think another couple weeks to confirm that it is Endo on the other side of these trades. But pretty much all signs are pointing to that being a logical conclusion, especially looking at the trading volume. Endo seems to take a brunt. Like it's harder for Endo move on good news, very easy for it to move on negative news, and primarily. So looking at the two largest trading days over the last week or so, although this past one dropped 40%, but given given the volume compared to the average 60-day volume, a 40% drop would have kind of been the minimal drop one would have expected, given the way that the market treats treats Endo. So we because of that, I think that's another sign that kind of gives us a strong indication that Endo is on the other side of these trades, and buying back shares. I think we both said it the last few Endo, that we think that it would be the best use of cash, especially regarding the amount of the effective float. Still close to 83% are held by institutions. So although it's 229 million shares outstanding, 83% that drops that that really drops that down to about 40 million shares outstanding for the float. So for the remaining retailers and even other institutions or hedge funds that may want to participate. So given that differential within the effective float, it makes sense that Endo uses their $1.5 billion of unrestricted cash to buy as much of that effective float as remaining. We made no secret about it. That's our opinion. We think that would be one of the best uses of cash, especially for shareholder value. So, given that perspective, obviously Wall Street Journal, given some pretty recent news, it was. I think I've said it offline before. Was there any confirmation? It just seemed really the way that this article read. It was a little strange to me. It was a little strange to me. I don't have any proof that they did or didn't, but that's my issue. That they're talking to law firm that specializes in restructuring. It's certainly possible. Does it really make sense? Not really. Not, at least not to me, not in my brain. When we look at, because it's quite easy, especially for folks that aren't familiar with Endo, they just looked at Endo a few weeks ago or within the last week, and doing a little bit of due diligence on a very superficial level. And most critics of Endo point to and rightfully so, they point to the lawsuits. They point to meshed claims. They point to the potentiality of the opioid crisis. And for the last 3 to 4 years, Endo really has been embattled legally. And, had there's been a conversation 3 or 4 years ago from critics, I would probably lean towards their critique that they have, that they're making valid points. But one of the most recent critiques of Endo, I'm gonna just call it what it is, very amateurish. Is because it's almost, I don't know, it's nonsensical. I'm trying to find some nice words because I'm gonna just say it what it is. It's idiotic. It's just plain idiotic. And the reason that is idiotic is because if the critique about the legal claims were valid 3 to 4 years ago would have been the time to side with those claims. 3 to 4 years ago, these critiques were, some of them were there, but the more recent bandwagon jumpers, it's like, what balance sheet are you looking at? So a company that went from having mesh payments, handle actually servicing their debt, paying out mesh payments, taking off Aparno off of the shelves preemptively, already handling the opioid crisis. Even when Tennessee was supposed to be this big, like, oh my God, the smoking gun, with the default judgment for Tennessee, and it was for $35 million. It's like, okay. And if you look at their balance sheet, 3 to 4 years ago, it was weaker compared to today. So this company has reduced their exposures over this 3 to 4 years. Endo has reduced their exposure to generics, was about a third of their income when we looked 2 to 3 years ago. And in spite of reducing their dependency and exposure to generics, they increased the strength of their balance sheet. In spite of Vasostrict, in spite of mesh claims and payments, they increased the strength of their balance sheet. In spite of the opioid crisis and
$8 billion debt.
Right, and $8 billion in debt, they've strengthened their balance. They have more cash. Like, this is why I say it's just plainly idiotic. How many companies have more cash on hand than their market cap?
I'm thinking market cap's around what, 567, around 500 to 550, something like that.
Right, actually a little bit lower. From with the most recent decline, it's taking the market cap under 500. Floating around. Right, it is floating around. 470s, 480.
470. Okay.
So, like, how many companies have more cash in the bank? And not to mention, like, we didn't even talk about the things that they've done since then. If a company is looking to restructure because they can't handle their debts, much like the critique, and often for some weird reason, other than simply being in the same sector, but Endo and Mallinckrodt is often put in the same sentence for some reason. And to me, the only reason that you would put it in there as an equalizer would be because you have lazy analytical skills. And it's just you're transposing Mallinckrodt onto Endo when it makes zero sense. It just makes zero sense. That's like transposing Dell onto Microsoft or IBM onto Apple. It's like, what are you talking about? Yes, they all make computers. They all make some version of software. But these are two different companies with two different leaders, two different outcomes, two different balance sheets. So, someone that typically does that, or critique that does that, to me is you're just lazy. And if you're going to be a lazy analyst, why even do it? Why even put your name on it? Why even, but however, not only have they been able to strengthen their balance sheet, but they've made 2 acquisitions in the last 12 months alone. They have rolled out in our opinion, one of the most groundbreaking treatments that we think, and certainly even more than, I will stand on that square a little bit stronger than that. With Endo themselves, because Endo is not a company that kind of toots his own horn very hard, but Quo is at current the only injectable treatment for cellulite. I mean, this is huge. Cellulite, affects over 90% of women. This is not simply about aesthetic, but this is much like Botox, which I think that given the same time period, we look 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, we're going to see sweeping past Botox. If we do kind of a year by year comparison in a retro analysis. So, I just think that when you look at this company and to advocate for bankruptcy, it just makes no sense. It makes no sense to me, and that's my reasons why. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm certainly open to being wrong. It's not the first time in life I've been wrong, but I just need to see some compelling information. So it just makes it makes no sense. When you have a company that has $1.5 billion unrestricted cash, and the cash is twice as large as the market cap, and we're not even in Q4 yet. So that's the other thing that kind of makes no sense to me. But as far as going back into the current embattled Endo with New York State AG, Letitia James is clearly a woman on a mission. At this point, as I've said before, what are you guys doing? This seems more like a political stunt. I'm just going to call it what it is. That's the way I see it. Where, what are they hoping? What is New York hoping to gain out of prolonging this process? They've already settled with Oklahoma. They've already settled with Ohio. They've already settled with Tennessee. Even a default judgment at this point is not going to garner something that warrants dragging this process out another 2 years. In other words, if you're going to drag out a legal process, management for a case is, what is the reward, right? What are we dragging this out for? If it's, they got a default judgment in Tennessee, it's $35 million. If Tennessee decided to drag it out another 2 years, and let's say they got that 35 million up to 45 million, was that worth another 2 years of a state going without resources towards treatment and prevention? Was that enough? Was that 2 years worth of dragging out for another 10 million bucks really worth the continued destruction going on within the communities regarding opioids? So it's like, what are we really doing here? What are you hoping for? Just to put it in perspective, this is, Endo is in the same conversation or part of the same group as Johnson & Johnson. And when we look at Johnson & Johnson, they're 10 times larger than 10 times larger than Endo, and also has a hand in more of the distribution and manufacturing process than Endo. So when we talk about damage, is that's really what this case is about, is the damage that has been done. So someone that is one thing to kind of be a murderer, right? You go in, break in someone's home, you murder them. But it's another thing to not only be a murderer, but also the manufacturer of the weapon and the distributor of the weapon that you murdered someone with. And that's really the difference here when you look at the Johnson & Johnson, where they had more involvement within the opioid crisis, which when you look at the original judgment award of $585 million, you can see that difference, right? 585 million compared to 35 million, for example. And even that 585 million, it was appealed and is already come down, I believe, into the threes. So they've already appealed this significantly. So in other words, if a judge which is 10 times larger than Endo in terms of market cap, and had a more significant hand within the opioid crisis than Endo. And that company still didn't reach an award that's really going to justify a state missing out on resources. Then what are you hoping to gain as an AG from this company by dragging this thing out? So that's really, to me, is just kind of the latest in the goofy. At this point, I'm just like, I have no other word for it. But the fact that I just find it goofy at this point. It's like, just get it settled. Let's get it settled. Endo has already come to the table. The evidence that they're claiming that New York AG is claiming as being withheld has already been in literally every case. It was the same evidence that was in Oklahoma, same evidence in Ohio, same evidence in Tennessee. So somehow Tennessee got the information and was able to get to a finality. Ohio came with the same information and somehow got to an end. So if those states were competent enough to get the information and get to a final deal, it makes me question, again, what is New York doing? So the only motivation I see for dragging this out must be some, political ambitions and looking to use this as an ace up the sleeve in hopes that folks remember, being as tough on the opioid companies, much like it being tough on, mortgage companies, except for when it came to Steve Mnuchin, but that's another conversation. But we see it. We see the playbook.
Right.
In other words, and that's what it looks like. So I'm just gonna call it what it is. That's what it looks like to me. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's already been 4 years since Trump threw down the gauntlet that these opiate manufacturers are going to pay, and so it's been 4 years, and then it's a few more months of money that could be going for treatment prevention, which is the sole purpose of all this. And Trump, again, he settled with Purdue Pharma right before the election, and some of the state AGs were complaining about that. So he's saying it's time to get this. And but you bring up an interesting point about what is what if everybody got the same information, and what is New York? What information is New York asking for that the other states didn't have before they settled Oklahoma and Ohio? And secondly, they're using the default judgment in Tennessee as they're putting it on in the legal, I guess, in their argument for default judgment for in New York for Endo. So they're saying that behavior in Tennessee sort of justifies a default judgment in New York as well, because it's been continuing in other states. Well, haven't other states got information? Didn't Tennessee and Oklahoma and Ohio, didn't they get information? So you should have the same information they have. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that Endo was giving Tennessee and used as an argument for default judgment in New York, and then other states were getting information. Why weren't you getting it? So
yeah, it's really hard to make sense of it.
Right, but as far as the talk of restructuring, you're right. A couple of years ago, it would make more sense for Endo to try to restructure its debt. It had less cash flow, more uncertainty as they were trying to wean themselves from these pain-related drugs, and they still had more mesh claims. Mesh claims are almost nil now. It should be done. It should be finished by end of the year or maybe Q1 of next year. They had less cash, And now they already settled with 2 states already. They settled with Oklahoma and Ohio, and they've also settled with Sullivan County and a few other counties in Tennessee. So they have less opiates than they had 3 years ago. Because they've already settled some of these claims. So why would they seek a restructuring now that instead of 2 years ago? Why is the company in worse situation, worse financial condition today than it was a couple years ago? As far as
Did we get a source on this?
Well, they haven't. Well, I wouldn't say it didn't happen or a phone call didn't happen, but they haven't followed up on the on that on that article. The other thing is that as far as the Mallinckrodt comparison, Mallinckrodt was already a not a going concern even before the opiate litigation.
Exactly.
Actar was their top selling drug. It was the Medicare was saying we're not even going to pay for this anymore. Not at these prices. They had to raise the price like a couple hundred percent just to service the debt they used to buy Questor, which owned Actar. So it wasn't even a going concern. The opiate litigation had nothing to do with opiate litigation. So throwing Mallinckrodt in there with Endo, it's just like two companies that both sold opiates, but they're two totally different companies, two totally different situations. As far as the on August 20th, the 45 million shares traded, I would have thought that many shares traded stock should have gone much lower. The fact that it held up somewhat shows you that there's probably somebody buying on the other side, as well as next trading shares traded shows you that probably someone buying on the other side. And on the August 20th date, that short sellers sold 13 million shares that day. So there was 13 million shares sold short on the 20th. So some probably fear from some retail investors. So I would guess somebody was buying on the other side. I'm hoping that was Endo. As far as let me see. Again, we talked about the fact they've already settled claims elsewhere. So I'm going to go with the effective flow. I put that chart up briefly while Torian was speaking. I'm going to go over that effective flow one more time. So we kind of updated it. We sort of updated. So we'll see what where we are now. So here's the chart. So we previously showed that Endo's based on its effective float, the amount of shares that was not owned by insiders and institution, it was actually had a higher, it was more highly shorted than Apple AMC. So as of June 15th, there were we thought the effective float was about 79% versus 34%, 38% for GameStop, C, respectively. So we revised this. Actual float is about 220 million shares. Insider ownership is about 83%. So the amount of tradable shares is closer to 37 million than 29 million. That's currently. That's before any share buyback. So the shares sold short currently it's 28 million shares. So the effective as of as we're speaking now, previous couple of days, it's about 75%. Okay, so let's say Endo's buying back stock. What you think they are? Let's say they bought back 20 million shares already. That means that the tradable shares would be around 17 million, and the shares sold short 28 million, which would be about 160% of what we call tradable shares that are not held by insiders or institutions. And we know these institutions aren't selling. So effective flow is probably, if Endo's bought back 20 million shares, effective flow is probably more, probably about the short shares sold short as a percentage of the effective flow is probably in a 160% range. And this would show that if they got to like 37 million shares, if they bought back 37 million shares, institutions and insiders would practically control 99%, 100% of the entire float. And so if there was a short squeeze or something that caused the stock to bounce higher, whether it was ruling on the generic challenge to Vasostrict, whether Judge Gargiulo said there's not going to be a default judgment, or whether Endo actually settled with the state of New York, and the stock spiked for whatever reason, it could be difficult for shorts to cover. And at these prices, I would guess Endo's buying. They should be buying shares hand over fist, and they should be buying cheap shares. So even though the stock is trading extremely low, the good part is that if Endo is buying back stock, they don't have to use as much dry powder to get to that 37 million number we're looking at. They don't have to use as much dry powder as they would have to if the stock was trading at $8 or $10 per share. So we think the company is highly shorted, and it's much more highly shorted than the actual numbers show. So when you actually look at the effective float, the short shares so short as percentage of the effective float is more highly shorted than GameStop and AMC. So when the market realizes this, I think it could be a good sign for Endo. Or if there's a scenario or an event happens where the stock begins to rise. I'm not saying this alone will cause a short squeeze, but if there's something that could cause the stock to rise, it could be difficult for shorts to cover if there's nobody selling.
Well, I mean, just kind of doing the math based on the assumption, like we, just offline, we kind of chatted before, that, let's say Endo is holding, roughly around 20 million shares, or purchased about 20 million shares since filing S3 a couple weeks ago. And even if we push it out closer to that 37 or 40 million in terms of tradable shares, it would literally be less than about 60 million for Endo to purchase up the remaining tradable shares of the float. So if there's we're kind of guesstimating right around 37 million, but even if we push it up on a higher estimate, just call it an even 40 million, and let's say even at $3 a share, because right now Endo has been trading under $3 a share for pretty much the good part of the week. But even on a bounce, let's say $3 even 40 million shares, easy math, 120 million bucks. So clearly that is a drop in the bucket compared to the $1.5 billion in unrestricted cash that they have, and pretty much a kind of a cheap investment into the company on Endo's part, which is why we continue to stand on the square that we do. We don't feel alone on this rock, simply because 83% of the float is still held by institutional capital. So clearly there is a strong reason that 83% of the float is held by institutions. I would argue that balance sheet, just simply the balance sheet, and looking at the efficacy of the management to be able to pull this company when it really was in its darkest days, kind of 3 to 4 years ago, where the most recent critiques would have made sense. They would have just been logical. Just simply looking at the numbers, it would have looked largely impossible for Endo to kind of crawl its way back to some profitability. And not only have they been able to crawl their way back to surviving, but they're at a place where the company is genuinely thriving. So I think that speaks to the strength of the management, speaks to the strength of Endo, speaks to the strength of even the board. So there are some seriously good decision making within that company, and not just talk, but action. As we've noted before, you can go back and look at Endo's calls, earnings calls. They are not they're probably one of the least boastful companies. When you do a comparison, they don't do a lot of talking in terms of kind of the gravitas or being braggadocious. They just simply put their heads down and have grinded. And the company itself has gotten to a much healthier place. So the being able to reinvest even on a high million back into the company to do stock buyback, that's pennies on the dollar, and I think would be one of the best moves that they can make. It was certainly obviously shareholder, and it does have me scratching my head with the shorts. I have yet to see anything put out by way of publication. If they see something that we don't see about the company, they're certainly holding their cards very, 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 very close to their chest. Shorts typically are not the silent type. Shorts typically are shouting from the mountaintops, trying to break open every outlet that will listen to them. Just look at Lordstown, right? Look at look at RLX. Look at companies that have been heavily shorted, and it's kind of proving why they should be shorted. But we have yet to see any of that kind of roll out regarding Endo. So I have to believe that it just doesn't exist. And if I'm a short seller, at some point, you're going to have to cover. And if Endo is buying up the lion's share of the stock, and institutions are holding already 83% of this, that's going to be a long and painful way to get out. So yeah, it seems that at some point, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but at some point, this is going to bounce. This is going to some catalyst, whether it's folks just simply waking up to Endo, looking at, doing the due diligence and looking at the strength of the company and kind of making a bet on Endo. But there's going to be a catalyst. Something is going to, and whether it's the outcome of new peace, but there is going to be some news that is going to cause, or some event that is going to cause a drive in the upward direction when it comes to Endo's price action, and it's going to be a painful experience for shorts. So yeah, in terms of price action, the thing that just kind of has me still scratching my head about the shorts.
Okay. Thank you for that. We're going to ask the people on the YouTube people to again to subscribe to the channel, share the video. Okay. So I'm going to put up a tweet from Journal. Okay. Okay, so this is on August 20th, the Wall Street Journal. Alexander Gladstone, he put up a tweet that says Endo closes down 40% Friday following a report that the pharmaceutical company hired restructuring advisor Alvarez and Marceau. Litigation from states and local governments, which we've known about for 4 years. We've known about the sprawling opiate litigation. And someone named the Unknown Baller, I think he's trying to troll me. He says, looks like Shock Exchange and other Endo bulls are also in distress. So I'm hoping that this type of, this could be like the line of demarcation that people are reacting to the fact that stock is falling, and that could be a combination of negative news and short selling. Because again, we talked about in the past, the Endo only traded, so shorts have found a stock that they can manipulate by dumping shares onto the market that they don't own. So I'm hoping we can look back on this tweet in a couple months and say this was the line of demarcation as far as when Endo hit a floor potentially. So when you hear this type of talk that is just dropping on sentiment, and there's I wouldn't say no real analysis behind it, but again, we've known about the sprawling opiate litigation, for years now, and we think their sprawling open litigation is much less than Mallinckrodt, who settled for $1.6 billion. Okay, I'll take that down. But a couple of things. So, again, there's several catalysts Mr. Mitchell was referring to. So we haven't even talked about generic Chantix, which has a $1.6 billion market for generic Chantix, which I guess helps treat smoking cessation. And before the pandemic, Chantix generated about $1.1 billion. Pfizer's pulling Chantix off the shelves because of some potential connection to cancer, and so the FDA allowed Endo's generic Chantix to be approved quicker than expected because just they have to have a product to treat smoking cessation. They also allowed a Canadian company, Apple, to put a generic version on the market temporarily until they can get, I guess Endo can get their product launched. We're hoping it's going to get launched in a couple of weeks. I've called, I've done some channel checks. I haven't heard back yet about, I think it's back on back order. I heard in some places, and some places don't have it, but what they have available is Apotex for now. But we know that Pfizer's pulling Chantix off the market. So we look at, look at some back of the envelope numbers. Again, $1.1 billion in revenue. Endo took a 60% market share. That would be $660 million in revenue. They had to discount it by 30% because of the generic pricing versus branded. You're talking about $460 million of annual revenue. It would be Endo's third biggest product behind Vasostrict and Xiaflex. That could be a catalyst if it's come out Q3 numbers. Again, could be a catalyst if they knock the cover off the ball again, because Xiaflex is growing at double-digit rates. Generic Chantix not priced in, and Quo is continuing to penetrate the market. And I think Quo and Xiaflex and generic Chantix would definitely outweigh any diminution in Vasostrict as it returns to normalized levels, because it was high levels amid the pandemic because of hospitalizations. Generated like $760 million in revenue. I think before the pandemic, it's about $560 million, something like that. So as it returns to pre-pandemic levels, Vasostrict's revenue is declining. You have, again, potential for the judge in New York to say there's no default judgment. There's potential for a New York settlement, potential for a global settlement. There's also, we think that, every couple of weeks, Yahoo updates shares outstanding, the float, and the short interest for these companies. Endo's short interest, the float, shares outstanding at August 15th would probably come out in early September. But they probably weren't buying back stock until after that. So by mid-September, we should have an idea if Endo is actually buying back stock. If people see a large decline in the float, that could be something that the mainstream media writes about, and not just Torian and I talking, but something the mainstream media could potentially write about, like Business Insider or Barron's or somebody. That could be another potential catalyst. So there's several potential shots on goal for Endo that could potentially drive the stock higher. So that's pretty much what we want to talk about. And Endo has been moving in silence. It hasn't talked a lot about generic Chantix. You won't hear about it until Q3, right? And you won't know if they're buying back stock until probably mid-September. Won't talk about it until the earnings call, unless somebody asks them specifically. So that's pretty much our take on it. Unless Torian has one more parting shot.
I mean, I think I've pretty much, said it all. And you said the other half. I feel like, it's just mind blowing. When you have a company, because you can't point to too many companies that one have, over $1 billion sitting in cash, and their market cap is, essentially 60% less than that. It creates just a head scratcher when it comes to market anomalies. Endo is definitely a market anomaly, but it's only a matter of time before the market recognizes that this is a market institutions have already recognized that Endo is significantly undervalued. So it's only a matter of time before more value investors come across Endo. This is the the very epitome of Warren Buffett's mentor, Benjamin Graham. Who wrote The Intelligent Investor, and talked about value investing over the long term with companies, but finding those undervalued companies, and those companies that are largely spending on R&D. Like this literally fits almost verbatim the type of undervaluing that Benjamin Graham pretty much taught Warren Buffett, and he's hailed as the greatest investor, right? In the last 100 years. So this is Endo truly does represent that, just from a value investing standpoint. So I think it's only a matter of time before value investors, other even hedge funds, and just retailers come across Endo, and we'll get to a fair value. That's obviously where we feel a little bit differently than Citigroup, just simply looking at the numbers. What we think is going to be the potential with Quo. Quo is already showing that in the midst of a pandemic, still having double-digit growth. So while Citigroup put out price target between 11 and 13, we believe that price target is more than double that, closer to the $28 to $30 mark, and we believe that's a conservative estimate as well. So whether one thinks it's Citigroup is more right, whether one thinks that our analysis is a little bit more right, it still points in the exact same direction, that Endo is significantly undervalued. Once the eyeballs do get on this, once Endo's price action does begin to move, it's going to be extremely hard to get in at these rates, at these prices. So it's just really a matter of time before we see that. And as I've stated before, for the shorts that are there, is going to be a painful ride. It's going to be a painful ride up, and trying to get out. So it would definitely, I guess, if I'm on the other side, I would take my profits, kind of laugh that I got to pay a couple mortgages from the profits, maybe even got some extra bonuses, and kind of get out of the way, because at some point, today, tomorrow, next week, 2 months from now, it's going to begin, and once it begins, it's going to be a long while before it stops. That's just kind of my last 2 cents on it.
Okay, so we think fundamental investing still works, and we think it's still important. So this is our shot at fundamental investing. You're looking at the balance sheet, EBITDA over $1 billion, 40% EBITDA margins, and it's only going higher. And looking at the trying to dissect this puzzle as far as why the stock's dropping, thinly traded, and when there was a potential short squeeze last month, after the Tennessee settlement, the $35 million stock went to 580, and then it fizzled out. Maybe if it spikes this time with fewer shares traded with a lower float, and somebody on the other side, could be Endo and somebody else, by that time, maybe it won't fizzle out. So to do, but if individuals bought and held, it'll also be a big help to the share price. Still make it more difficult for shorts to cover, and maybe take out the profit incentive for them to continue to dump shares into the market. So that's basically it. I mean, this is Endo. This is Trump and the GE. Endo moves in silence. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So this. For Torian Mitchell. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.